doing? Thanks for Good to see you, Rabbi. No, I'm getting over something. Here, I have these for a reason.
Okay. Yantiv. If you don't have a l'chaim in your cup yet, please do something about that. Take a l'chaim. The Rowan's coming around with l'chaim. Sure. And make sure we have all get involved and we say l'chaim. It's a special day. We want to connect to the Alter Rebbe, to redemption, and to each other. The Alter Rebbe said that by celebrating this day, Kislev, the day of the Alter Rebbe's redemption, anyone who celebrates this day, the Alter Rebbe said, I will lift them out from discomfort and bring them to abounding relief. I'll lift them out of darkness and bring them to light. And so just by being here tonight, everyone is things on their schedule, but because we have this connection to the Alter Rebbe, to our Rebbe, so all the things which are on our list are put aside a little bit for Farbrengen. But now that we're here, it says in the Gemara, you can't begin to pray until you walk into a shul the size of 2 doorways. You have to walk into a shul the length of 2 doorways before you begin to pray. The similar way in the Farbrengen is you're walking away from where you were before, turning off your cell phone, turning off your mind from all the other worries you had before. That's one doorway. There's another doorway, is saying l'chaim to each other, and wishing each other well, to really get involved. L'chaim, l'shon ha'teva, b'nei chassidus, dakis t'kasim s'chasim, l'chaim. Tonight's event was generously sponsored and l'schus Moshe ben Chamadina for Farbrengen Shlema, and also by Bas Sarah Schusa, and it's open for more sponsorship. Anyone wants to participate in the Straight Merit. It's also sponsored by the Nessi family, Schusa Matei Levracha, and by Rabbi Baruch Nufeld, Schusay, Shkech Baruch. When the Alter Rebbe was in prison, he was being cross-examined by the greatest minds of the Russian government, people who had studied philosophy, and they asked him a lot of hard questions. And at one point in the interrogation, those just walked in and went, the food has been served over there, please take a bracha. Thank you. Okay. So the Alter Rebbe was being interrogated, and in the middle of the interrogation, a serious interrogation, he's being accused of treason, he suddenly broke out into a smile. And the smile served 2 purposes. One purpose of the smile was to hint to them, you don't want to know the answer to this question. The question was a very sensitive question about Jewish people versus Gentile people. And obviously, you probably, with a smile, you're saying, you see everything you're asking me, I have the answer. You probably don't want to have this view of yourself in the mirror. That was one idea of the smile. But Chassidim say there was another idea. Another occasion, the Alter Rebbe said that when he was in Tanya Sivyet was the name of the committee that was meant to interrogate people accused of treason. And the Alter Rebbe said, when I was in Tanya Sivyet, things were very dangerous. However, the Alter Rebbe said, joy sweetens judgment. Happiness sweetens judgment. That means that when you're happy, your happiness, not only does it take away the judgment of Hashem, it sweetens it. What that means is that whatever was before something that was negative, something that was weighing down on you, something that was cumbersome, something that was bringing you angst, something frustration, something that wasn't good, the simcha, the joy that you have, actually transforms the negative itself to good. So it's not only that the simcha takes away the negative, the simcha transforms the negative itself to good. So that's what we're doing here tonight, solving the simcha of the Alter Rebbe. The simcha will transform all the negative in each of our lives to good, and to transform the negative of the exile to the good of the coming Mashiach. We should see this happen. I want to give a shukayach to the Dahan family, to Eliyahu Dahan, putting together a beautiful flyer and the decor. Thank you, Lily, putting in so many hours, making this event possible. Thank you, Rabbi Hecht, the Rebbe's emissary to Farbrengen, California, Well, Baruch Hashem is no stranger to our community. He's been here before, and every time he comes, it's like a shachayonu, because when you after Hecht visits, the next day you have a new perspective on life, and a new excitement, new feeling, new happiness, and with all Rabbi Hecht's humility about that's the reality. Hecht visits our community. Next day you wake up it's different. So Shkoyach Rabbi Hecht, and let's get involved again. Let's say l'chaim. And let's be a part of this. Let's get involved. Chaim Baruch. When the Alter was in prison, he recited the verse, Hashem has redeemed my soul in peace from those who were against me. And as soon as he said that verse, he was released from prison. Let's sing the niggin about that verse. Adam Yishalayim Nafshi Ikravli Ki Berabi Alui Madi Adam Yishalayim Nafshi Ikravli Ki Berabi
9:55. Song Padam Shalom Nafshi is 3 simple words at the end. If you didn't have the whole song from Padam Shalom from the beginning, Mela. But the 3 latest words, this is easy. They are Va'ani Eftach Bach. David HaMelech concludes there, and I consistently have my trust in you. I have my trust in you. 3 words, Va'ani Eftach Bach. This, Alter Rebbe says, when he said the words Padam Shalom Nafshi, when it goes. So, and Chassidim for generations have sung these 3 words over and over again. 3 simple words. Va'ani eftach bach. I place my trust in you. Please join us. Let's do it together. Va'ani eftach bach. Va'ani eftach bach. Va'ani eftach Ladies, you okay if I sit or should I stand? No, working the mic? What's the mic? No?
Like your work?
Can't hear myself. I can do it. You okay if I'm sitting? So maybe I should stand. Huh? It happens. We're always connected. We have to stay connected. The last thing we want is to be disconnected. We have to stay always stay connected. Stand better? I don't know. Okay, we'll sit. That's it. I prefer to say. Good Yom Tov, everybody. Good Yom Tov.
Yom Tov, Yom Tov.
Shana Tova, Belimud Chassidus, Ubedarke Chassidus, Tekoseva, V'Sechasemu. We should be able to truly inculcate within ourselves everything that Chassidus teaches us, particularly Chassidus Chabad. Chaim, Chaim, Chaim. I want to focus tonight on the talk of the Rebbe, where the Rebbe discusses what in fact is the novel experience of the 19th of Kislev. What makes the 19th of Kislev so novel? And the Rebbe begins with a story. You're going to need background to get background to get background. Okay? So we'll start with a story. The Alter Rebbe, the founder of the Chabad Hasidic movement, was one of the youngest disciples in Mizrich. The founding of the Hasidic movement, just catch everybody up if you're not familiar, the Hasidic movement was founded by the Baal Shem Tov. Rabbi Yisrael Baal Shem Tov was born in the year 1698. He was subsequently succeeded by one of his closest disciples, Rabbi Dov Ber, the Maggid of Mizrich, the preacher of Mizrich. And the seat of leadership of the Hasidic movement was transferred from Mezhebush, which was the city of the Baal Shem Tov, to Mizrich, which was the city of the Maggid, where the Maggid lived. Without going into lengthy details, the Alter Rebbe, the founder of the Chabad Hasidic movement, at one point in his life, journeyed to Mizrich and became one of the closest disciples of the Maggid. Again, the whole story of the Alter Rebbe's arrival there is maybe for another night's Farbrengen. The Alter Rebbe came to Mizrich, became a devotee of the Maggid. It turned out that every step of the Alter Rebbe's life till that point had been foretold by the Baal Shem Tov, and every step of the way, including what the Maggid was to do with the Alter Rebbe when he arrives in Mizrich. The Alter Rebbe quickly became part of what was called the Chavraya Kadisha, the Holy Society, the inner circle of the disciples and Chassidim of the Maggid of Mizrich. But within the Chavraya Kadisha, the Alter Rebbe was significantly younger than any of the other members of this inner circle. So much so, they basically called him the kid. They called him Zalman Yu Litvak. It was like Zalman Yu the kid, who came from Lithuania. Technically, he came from what was called then White Russia, but that was, might as well have been Lithuania. They called him Zalman Yu Litvak, the kid. And so he was significantly younger than almost anybody else that was in the Chavraya Kadisha, the Holy Society. Within that same group, there were some people who had been disciples of the Baal Shem Tov along with the Maggid of Mizrich himself. So they were contemporaries of the Maggid who were now followers of the Maggid and part of the Chavraya Kadisha. Then there were some people who were disciples of the Maggid, and then there was the Alter Rebbe, who was younger than anybody else. One of these holdovers from the generation of the Baal Shem Tov was a great and holy tzaddik named Rabbi Pinchas the Pinchas of Karetz. Now Rabbi Pinchas Karetz accepted the Maggid as the new leader of the Hasidic movement, but since he himself was also a disciple of the Baal Shem Tov, there were certain innovations. And the Maggid, under the direction of the Baal Shem Tov, before the Baal Shem Tov passed away, but the Maggid had his own unique style. He put his own thumbprint on what the Hasidic movement was to become. The Pinchas Karetz, and not everything that Maggid did was totally up to speed with him, but he followed. One day, the Pinchas of Karetz is walking through the shul, and he sees a page of chassidus laying on the floor in the dirt. And he picks it up off the floor, and he's standing and staring at it. And he's bothered by the idea, obviously he had been bothered even before that, by the idea that the Maggid was now expanding the circle of who had access to these incredibly deep mystical teachings and these incredibly deep ideas. The Maggid had sort of expanded the circle. In the Baal Shem Tov's generation, it was a very closed, tight circle. The masses that followed the Baal Shem Tov were taught simple ideas of what Hasidic movement was about, but the deep inner mysticism was a closely guarded secret amongst just a small society. The Maggid had opened that up to some extent. And that was something that Rabbi Pinchas of Koretz was not exactly excited about. Now Rabbi Pinchas of Koretz sees a page of chassidus laying on the floor, in the dirt. He's very bothered by it. He picks it up off the floor and he's standing and staring at it. Just very bothered by the fact that he has this page of chassidus dirt. And while he's standing there staring at it, Rabbi Pinchas of Koretz feels a tap on his shoulder. He stops to turn around. Who's standing there? Zalman Litvak, the Alter Rebbe, the young kid. And the Alter Rebbe, without asking any questions, without saying anything, immediately launches into a parable. And he says to Pinchas of Koretz, without asking any questions, we're starting a conversation, just go straight into the story. He says to the Pinchas of Koretz, there was once a king. The king had an only son, the prince. This was his only child. And the king had a gorgeous crown that was the envy of all the other kings who knew of it. What was so beautiful about this crown? The particular beauty of this crown was the centerpiece, crown jewel, that sat in the center of this crown. That was the most unique and gorgeous stone anyone could possibly find. And it was that stone that made the crown so beautiful. One day, the prince falls ill, physically ill. Of course, being an only child of the king brings in the best doctors to diagnose his son's sickness and to heal him. The doctors finish their diagnosis and they come to the king and they say that his son has a very, very unique sickness and that there's only one cure to it. The cure is to take out that centerpiece jewel that makes the king's crown as beautiful as it is, and to take that jewel, that most particular jewel, and to grind it to dust. And then to take it after you ground it into dust, mix it with water, mix the dust with water, and give that as a potion to the prince to drink. And if he drinks that, that's his only chance of healing. And all this the Alter Rebbe is telling to the Pinchas of Koretz. The Alter Rebbe continues, he says, the king says, let's try other remedies first. Let's see what other remedies there are. So the doctors begin to bring remedies upon remedies upon remedies. Some of them help a little bit, some of them don't help at all. In the meantime, the prince has his up days, his down days, but he is steadily in a trajectory, unfortunately, downwards, getting sicker and sicker and sicker every single day. Finally, it reaches a day, the king comes in, and he sees that his son, the prince, is in a coma. Sadly. In a coma and not moving. And almost, unfortunately, at death's door. The king turns to the doctors, and he says, okay, take my jewel from the center of my crown, grind it up into dust, mix it with water and give it to his son to drink. The doctors turn to the king and they say, Your Highness, it may be too late. It may be too late. It may be so too late, we're not even sure we can get the prince to drink anything now. He's in such a coma and he has lockjaw, we're not even sure he'll drink anything. And the king turns to the doctors and he says, and up into dust, mix it with water, pour it over his face. even if all of it spills all over the place on the floor, and it's flying everywhere on the floor, maybe one drop will enter into the prince's mouth. Maybe he'll swallow one drop of the potion, and maybe that will revive him and save him. Having finished the parable, the Rebbe turned and walked away. Do you all understand what he was getting at? Everybody understand that? I have to explain the nimshal. Okay. I'll explain it anyway.
Yeah.
Okay. The nimshal that Rebbe was getting at was that as the Jewish people progressed through exile, which is a time we are Hashem's only child. Hashem is the king. We, the Jewish people, are Hashem's only child. And as we progressed through exile, we got sicker and sicker and sicker, more and more overwhelmed by the exile around us. And each time, there was a new revelation of another level of Torah, different remedies. And each remedy helped a little bit along the way. But now we've reached a point where the child is in such critical condition, the Jewish people are in such a critical state, that the Baal Shem Tov had to reveal chassidus, and the Maggid had to take chassidus to such a place where it would spill all over the floor. And even though it spills all over the floor, if even one drop will enter into the prince's mouth, meaning if one yid would be able to revive his soul as a result of learning a little bit of chassidus, even though the risk is that you're going to wind up with a piece of chassidus on the floor and you're going to pick it up and it's going to have dirt on it, doesn't make a difference. Maybe one drop will enter and save the child's life. That was the nimshal. That was what he was getting at with the parable. Okay? Rabbi Karetz understood the parable. The Alter Rebbe didn't have to explain it to him. The Alter Rebbe walked away. Later on that night, the Maggid's attendant came over to the Alter Rebbe, to Zalman, and said, the Rebbe wants to see you. The Maggid wants to see you. The Alter Rebbe came into the Maggid's room, and the Maggid said to him, we need to know, I need to share with you, that today you saved my life. When Rabbi Karetz picked up that piece of chassidus off the floor, and was standing and staring at it, his soul ascended on high. And he presented himself before the heavenly tribunal, holding in his hand the soiled page of chassidus, and argued before the heavenly tribunal, look what Baruch is doing! This is awful! This is awful! And literally the Maggid tells the Alter Rebbe, literally my life was in danger. Literally my life was in danger. And as the heavenly tribunal was deliberating on what should my judgment be, because now look at the way I'm teaching chassidus, and the chassidus is laying on the floor in the dirt. As the heavenly tribunal was adjudicating it and was deliberating, all of a sudden the sound came up on high to the heavenly tribunal, and it was the sound of your voice. And your parable was presented in your voice to the heavenly tribunal, and when your parable was finished, the heavenly tribunal ruled in my favor, and my life was saved. That's the end of that story. Before we go to our next thing, I'm going to tell you another story, because this is very important. When the Alter Rebbe was imprisoned, so it is known that even though the Baal Shem Tov and the Maggid had both passed away many years before, the Baal Shem Tov and the Maggid came to visit the Alter Rebbe, what was going on with his imprisonment. When they came to visit him the first time, the Alter Rebbe said, why is this happening to me? What have I done? What have I done to deserve this? Why am I in prison? On the possible death penalty. What did I do? What are they saying on high is my sin? What did I do wrong? So they told him, because you're teaching so much chassidus. You're spreading chassidus everywhere. Chassidus Chabad and chassidus, you're spreading it everywhere. You're teaching too much chassidus. So the Alter Rebbe said, what are you talking about? What are you talking about? I'm only repeating what I was taught from you. Now you have to remember, the Alter Rebbe physically in this world only met the Baal Shem Tov once in his lifetime. When the Alter Rebbe was 3 years old, the Alter Rebbe had the merit to be having his haircut. His first haircut was from the Baal Shem Tov. But the Baal Shem Tov gave strict instructions that when they were bringing him there, that they should not tell the Alter Rebbe who it is that he's meeting. Because the Baal Shem Tov specifically wanted the Alter Rebbe to come chassidus on his own. The Baal Shem Tov didn't want that the Alter Rebbe should know that everyone around him and his family is a chassid. He wanted him to find chassidus on his own. So he wasn't allowed to be told who it was that was cutting his hair. And in fact, when he left, he asked his mother, who was that man that just cut my hair? Who was that? And she answered, Zayda, grandpa. And from then on, for the rest of his life, the Alter Rebbe referred to Baal Shem Tov as Zayda. So other than that, the Alter Rebbe never met the Baal Shem Tov physically. So when the Alter Rebbe said in the prison, he says to them, what do you mean? I'm just saying what you taught me. I'm just repeating what you taught me. So the Baal Shem Tov looks at the Alter Rebbe. He says, really? Let me hear something. Say chassidus. Listen what's going on here. This is a prison in Petersburg, in Russia, in the Tsar's prison, in a prison cell. The Alter Rebbe is sitting. He's visited nocturnally by the Baal Shem Tov and the Maggid. They're standing or sitting in his prison cell, and they turn to him and they say, Zot chassidus. Let me hear you say some chassidus. The Baal Shem Tov wants to hear. You say you're just repeating our teachings? Let me hear something. And the Alter Rebbe closed his eyes, and he said chassidus in front of his two nocturnal visitors. When the Alter Rebbe finished, he opened his eyes, and he looked first at the Baal Shem Tov. And the Baal Shem Tov had a big smile on his face. And the Baal Shem Tov turned to the Maggid and said, Beryl, you taught him well. He says it exactly the way I taught it to you. You taught him well. He says it exactly the way I taught it to you. So the Alter Rebbe turns to these two nocturnal visitors and he says, so what happens now? What happens now? You're telling me that on high there's a decree against me for teaching too much chassidus. Tell me what I'm supposed to do when I get out. You want me to stop? Should I stop? They said, no. On the contrary, do it more and more and more, because once you break through, then you start to teach chassidus the way it's supposed to. And there are many other stories of the interactions with the Alter Rebbe and the Maggid and the Baal Shem Tov nocturnally during that time. The Rebbe takes these two stories that I just told you, juxtaposes them one on the other, and the Rebbe asks a very, very simple question. Anybody want to take a stab at what the question is? The Rebbe asks as follows. When Pinchas Karitzer was complaining on high that the Maggid is teaching too much chassidus, the Alter Rebbe brought this very beautiful parable about the king and his only son, the prince, and that blew open the gates, and the Maggid was saved. So when they come to him and say to him, or the Maggid and the Baal Shem Tov come to the Alter Rebbe, they say, you're teaching too much chassidus. The Rebbe asks, why doesn't the Alter Rebbe just turn around and say, whoa, this is deja vu here. We've been down this road before. Did you forget? King, prince, jewel, crime, remember that whole thing? Word once, what do you mean you're telling me that I'm teaching too much chassidus? What's that supposed to mean? We had this conversation before. We went through this entire process. The result was that you won. I was the one who came up with the story. What do you mean? What's going on here? What's this whole conversation? I'm teaching too much chassidus. What is this new conversation. What is this? Everyone understand the question? Because if you don't, I'll explain it again. Literally like in class. If you didn't understand the question, raise your hand, because it's going to be a very powerful answer.
Explain it again.
I'll explain it again. In the first story, when in heaven there was a complaint that the Maggid was teaching too much chassidus, the Alter Rebbe presented the parable of the king and the prince, and that solved the problem. Once you heard the parable of the king and the prince, okay, now we know why you have to teach too much chassidus. And it was the Alter Rebbe himself who came up with the idea of the parable. Now he's sitting in prison. The Baal Shem Tov and the Maggid come to visit him from heaven. He asks them what's going on. They tell him you're teaching too much chassidus. His first response should have been, we had this conversation, and I already answered it. King, prince, leave me alone. Instead, what does the Alter Rebbe say? Oh my goodness, what do you want me to do when I get out? Should I stop? What? Stop? You're the master of the answer to the question. What do you mean, stop? So the Rebbe's, so now do you understand the question? So the Rebbe's question is, why didn't the Alter Rebbe just go to that same story again? Why did the Alter Rebbe feel that that story doesn't answer the question? Why didn't the Alter Rebbe say, what do you mean? What are we talking about? What? I'm in prison for teaching too much chassidus. How could that possibly be? It doesn't make any sense. We did this already. Adjudicated and ruled. You're going to say in the depositions, asked and answered. Let me ask you the same question again. Everybody understands the question now? Okay. Chaim. Oh, you want the answer too?
There's only one person knows the answer.
First and Niggin.
Isn't it Chaim? The answer is Chaim.
Chaim.
Chaim l'racha. Hevre, zog l'chaim. Guys, let's say l'chaim.
Baruch HaKoyen, you said Chaim today? A little bit. Chaim l'bracha. Yimal l'kim kol mashalas levav chol l'toiv.
I just want to say Mazel Tov to Rabbi Yosef Ben Yamin. Yosef Ben Yamin, Baruch Hashem. It's his first. Mazel Tov Yosef Ben Yamin. It's his first Farbrengen with us. Yosef Ben Yamin, it's your first Farbrengen with us. First Yitas Kislev. That's all wish Yosef Ben Yamin. Mazel Tov, a Torah chub ma'asem tevim.
Amen.
Chaim Baruch.
Okay, so in my congregation, they have an attention span that lasts about 3.5 seconds. So my question is, does everybody still remember the question?
No. Vanilla.
You just tell the 2 stories again.
Repeat the question.
To be or not to be?
The Rebbe answers this question. In. Okay, I should digress for just a moment. Okay, I apologize. I personally do not come from Chabad stock. My parents and grandparents on both sides were of Hasidic stock, but not Chabad. Polish Chassidim. Sort of almost generic Polish Chassidim, very close to Tzans. I come from a long line of prestigious Shochtim and Chazanim, and somehow that all ended by my father. I didn't inherit it. Baruch Hashem, 2 sons. One of them's a Chazan, the other one's a Sheikhet. So I don't know. Maybe we're getting there. Maybe we'll come bringing it back. Okay? My great-great-grandfather was the Chazan by the famous Tzaddik of Chaim of Tzanz. He was the Chazan there. Anyway, the reason I'm telling you that is because at a very, very early age in my life, okay, just to give you the history. So my father and his family survived the war. My grandmother, she should rest in peace, whose actual yard site was the 18th of Kislev, it just ended. So Zechen Nishmasa Miriam Bas Rabbi Yosef L'chaim. So my grandmother Miriam was, I can't say anything short of a prophetess. She saw the Germans invade Poland from the west, while simultaneously the Russians invaded Poland from the east at the beginning of the war and split Poland in half. And they were in German-occupied Poland. My grandmother was a communal activist, very involved in the community. And to her, okay, the Polacks were anti-Semites, the Germans are anti-Semites, big deal, right? So when the Germans took over her city, she went to meet with the German commandant. Because she was an activist in the town, the German commandant, okay, you're now in charge of the city. So here's how things work in this city. You need to be brought up to snuff so you could run the city properly. In the middle of her explaining herself to the German, Yimach Shemoi, but I have to say this German did my grandmother the biggest favor in the world. He reared back and he slapped my grandmother across the face, knocking her to the ground. My grandmother got up off the floor, she went home, and she told my grandfather, we are leaving. We're leaving right now, not in another minute. My grandfather said, what are you talking about? What do you mean we're leaving? She said, we're leaving now. We take whatever we can and we're leaving. My grandfather said, what's the meaning of that? What do you mean we're leaving? Where would we go? Where would we go? So my grandmother said, we're Polish. We can go to the Russian-occupied side. We can go to the other side of Poland as Polish refugees and go to the Russian-occupied Poland. My grandfather said, going to Russian-occupied Poland, it's like from the frying pan into the fire. What are you, crazy? What are we going there for? That doesn't make any sense. And he followed that up by saying to my grandmother, this is nicht der erste Move, was the Deutschen sind gekommen in Poland. This is not the first time the Germans have come to Poland. Why are you all of a sudden so freaked out? Are we good here? Okay. Why are you so freaked out about it? Why does it bother you? And my grandmother said to my grandfather, "Ich habe gekickt the Deutsch in the Eug." I looked that German in the eye. That is an andere Deutsch. These are not Germans that we're used to. This is a very different kind of Germans. How she had that vision, no idea. Make a long story short, she took her kids and her husband. My father had his oldest brother, who was Ari Leibish, Hayad, who was away in yeshiva already. He was old enough to have gone away from the shtetl to go to a yeshiva to learn. And my grandmother sent for Leibish and said, "Come home right now, we're leaving." He said, "Leaving? No way, I'm not going anywhere, I'm not leaving the yeshiva."
Testing patience.
Okay.
Guys back.
Okay. So she said, "No, we're leaving. We're going to Russian occupied Poland. We're going over to the other side." And she told Leibish to come later. Unfortunately, Leibish never came. He perished in the Holocaust. His entire city, the town where he was, with all of the people in the yeshiva, they were all wiped out by the Germans. But everybody else made it. And then, it's a long story, they wound up getting permits to a city called Jambul, which is near Samarkand in, I was just corrected, it's Uzbekistan, right? Yeah, it's Kazakhstan, not Uzbekistan, right. Someone just corrected me on that, I'll tell you that story later. But they were in Jambul, and they were there for the duration of the war, and they survived the war. There's a million stories about that, and they ultimately came to the United States. When they arrived in the United States, my grandmother wanted to send her 3 boys to yeshiva, my father and his 2 brothers. They had studied some, but they had missed out on all the formative years, and she had a choice of 2 yeshivas. We're broadcasting live here, huh?
We'll be very light.
I should be careful. I don't know. She had a choice of 2 yeshivas. The only 2 yeshivas in Brooklyn were Torah V'das and Lubavitch. My grandmother said, Lubavitch is not quite my cup of tea. It's a very different brand of chassidus.
I thought you said there was a choice.
But the Misnagdim, never. Never, that's for sure now. No way they're going to the Misnagdim. So my grandmother took her 3 boys and she showed up at Lubavitch Yeshiva and enrolled them. And my father and his 2 brothers learned at Lubavitch. So I came from this Polish stock. My mother's side, my mother's family my mother was born in the United States. My grandparents came World War I. And that's a journey and a story in its own right, but they were also of Polish Hasidic stock. My grandfather loved Rebbe's and Rebbe's loved him. He was one of those stalwarts in the years when nobody was staying from. Somehow my grandfather stayed from. And not only did he stay from, my mother told me, she should rest in peace, half of her class in James Monroe High School in the Bronx, half of her class was Jewish. She had only 1 non-Jewish friend in public school. All of her friends were Jews. But unfortunately, the vast majority of her Jewish friends, the parents were from, almost none of the kids were. The only from kids was my mother, her sister, she only had the 1 sibling, she should rest in peace, and a 3rd woman. They were the only 3. Everybody else, the kids were not from, the parents were. And it's a journey in its own right. And because of that, my grandfather, every Rebbe that came, my grandfather was connected to them, they all knew him. So I came from very strong Polish stock on both sides. And I can't explain it. I can't explain it. Maybe I'll tell you a story later, maybe that's a little bit of an explanation. I can't explain it. But even at the youngest age, I knew that even though everybody around me, I grew up in Borough Park, Brooklyn, everybody around me was not Chabad. My family, my neighbors, my friends, nobody was Chabad. That's right. And but I knew not only that I was a Lubavitcher Chassid, but I knew that being a Lubavitcher Chassid meant that I was something utterly different than all of these other people around me. I can honestly tell you that I have that memory as far back as when I was 5 or 6 years old. I knew that. I had no idea what it was. I didn't know what it was because I was not learning in a Chabad yeshiva. I was not learning in Lubavitch at the time, because at the time, the Lubavitch yeshiva that my father had gone to on Bedford and Dean in Bedford-Stuyvesant was basically the same as sending your kid to Gaza, like a war zone. And my mother, under no circumstances, was going to let me and my brother go into this war zone every day for school. No way. But the first year the yeshiva moved from Bedford and Dean to Ocean Parkway in Flatbush, literally the first year, my brother and I came to learn in Lubavitch. We came to learn in Lubavitch. I entered the 5th grade, my brother entered the 8th grade. And so for the first 4 years of school, I did not know what it meant, but I knew that there was something different about me. I was a Lubavitcher. I knew people of various Hasidic groups. I knew Bobovers, and I knew Tzanzers, and I knew Gribovers, and I knew Vishnitzers, and I knew Stoliners, which is where I was studying in Stalin, etc. I knew all these different people. And to me, even though each one had his own little flavor and his own little wrinkle, but in the end, they were all sort of generic, the same thing. Everybody was the same. I was different. I knew that whatever I was something completely different. I was the Lubavitcher. Didn't even begin to understand what that really meant until I came to the Lubavitch Yeshiva and started to learn what it meant, what my difference meant. I'll tell you a story. A lot of people who know me know this story. My first year in Lubavitch Yeshiva, my teacher in the 5th grade in Ocean Parkway was Rabbi Zalman Morozov on the Lebanon Zayin Gesund. His son and grandchildren on Shlichus here in Valencia, the Magic Mountain Rabbi, is his son, Zalman Morozov from Montreal, right? Rabbi Zalman Morozov was my teacher. It was the only year he ever taught in school. The only year that I was in his class. And I still bump into him in 770 from time to time. Just a couple of weeks ago, the early morning minyan in 770, the first minyan, he's always there. And a couple of my friends from Yeshiva are there. He walked in, he saw me talking to my friends, and he said, "What is this, a class reunion?" You know how many years ago? This was 1971. Anyway, Rabbi Zalman Morozov would read the Hayom Yom every single day in class. And he came to the Hayom Yom, this is early on in the year, in Cheshvan. Rabbi Levin's going to remember which day in Cheshvan this is, because I always forget, where the Rebbe writes a story that Rabbi Kislev, who was one of the main chassidim of the Alter Rebbe, was once by the Alter Rebbe, and the Alter Rebbe wanted to give him a bracha of wealth. Rabbi Kislev said, "What do I need money for?" He was already a wealthy businessman, a very successful businessman. In fact, I don't want any money. Don't give me a bracha for wealth. Only a bracha for wealth. So then the Alter Rebbe said, "Okay, in that case, I'm going to give you a blessing for longevity, long life." So Rabbi Kislev said to the Alter Rebbe, "Fine, I'll accept a bracha for long life." But he said, "Abenish boorish years. I don't want it to be years where I'm not living a life where you have a mouth that doesn't speak, ears that don't hear. I don't want to have it be a life that's, physical and dead. If I'm going to live a life, I don't want it to be boorish years. I don't be poyerish yodim. That's what I don't want." Okay. I spoke Yiddish at the time, enough. Well enough, my teachers all taught in Yiddish in those years. But when I heard Zalman Morozov read this, he read it aloud in class. We were sitting in class, we didn't have an open Hayom Yom in front of us. He would read it aloud after we davened in class. We finished davening, Rabbi Zalman read the Hayom Yom. I was a whopping 8 years old at the time. I was 8 years old. And I heard Rabbi Zalman read this, and I misheard what he read. Maybe I deliberately misheard what he read. I don't know, it could be, it's a Freudian thing in your head. And instead of hearing him read, Nisht poyerish yodim, I heard him say, Nisht Polish yodim. If I'm going to have years, I don't want it to be Polish. That's what I heard. Nisht Polish yodim. And then the Hayom Yom continues there. What's Polish yodim? That you have eyes that don't see and you have ears that don't hear, etc., etc., etc. Being of Polish Hasidic stock, 8 years old. I was 8 years old. Honestly, the reason I'm telling this story is not because I don't understand till today how I had this level of insight. A, I'm not very smart. And B, at that time in my life, I wasn't very knowledgeable about these things. So I don't know how I had this. But when I heard him say, Nish Poile Shiyarin, what I thought he said was Nish Poile Shiyarin, my immediate reaction was, wow, how did you Kasil Lepler know to say that?
How did what?
How did you Kasil Lepler know to say that he doesn't want Polish ears? I know what that means. I know what it means. Yes, Nish Poile Shiyarin, I get that. To me, that makes perfect sense. How did you Kasil Lepler understand that? I was shocked that he understood what I knew innately. And to me, it was such a validation of the first 8 years of my life. This was a total validation of the first 8 years of my life. A famous chassid of the Alter Rebbe understands and says, and it's printed in the Hayom Yom, exactly what I've known since as long as I'm old enough to understand. I was validated. And to the extent that an 8-year-old engages in any form of chassidus avodah, to the extent, this became chassidic introspection, chassidic effort and energy to develop yourself as a chassid, to the extent that an 8-year-old knows what that means. This became the cornerstone of my avodah. This is what I became the cornerstone. I have to make sure that I can eradicate, notwithstanding the fact that it is systemic to my DNA, much to my chagrin. Nobody's perfect, right? Nobody's perfect. So even though I was born stuck in this Polish body, my work has to be Nish Polish Yodin. I have to eradicate that from within myself. And I can honestly tell you that I didn't find out what it actually said until my bar mitzvah 5 years later. 5 years later, I was reading the Hayom Yom myself. I had a book, and I went, uh-oh. But there's another story about Chassidim and the Mittler Rebbe, which I'm not going to go into. This became the focal point of my life, eradicating that from within myself. Now, why did I just tell you that story? The reason I told you that story is because it serves, at least for me, and I feel that at Chassidish Farbrengen, if I can't talk to myself while you all listen, then you're not going to hear anything. If I'm talking to you, then for sure you don't hear it. If I'm talking to myself, and you happen to be listening, hopefully you'll find something in me talking to myself that will have meaning to you. But if this becomes about me talking to or at you, that's not what Chassidish Farbrengen is about. And therefore, it ultimately will, okay, you know that Rabbi, good speech, very nice, but it'll have absolutely no tangible effect on you. It can only have a tangible effect and really change our lives if it has meaning to me and has a tangible effect on me. So I deliberately told you that story as an introduction to the Rebbe's answer to the question that we asked before. Can we tease it, or should we go straight into the answer?
Rabbi, you're the MC, Rabbi.
Okay, Anigin. Then we'll get to the answer. First of all, big ashikoyach to our Baal Menagim. Geschmack to listen to you. Mamish geschmack. L'chaim u'bracha. Okay. Should I digress again? No, let's answer the question. If to digress, we'll do it later. The Rebbe says as follows. The answer to his question of why the Alter Rebbe didn't go to the story of the king and the prince, the Rebbe says that answer to that question is the defining difference between chassidus haklolos, the general concept of chassidus, and chassidus Chabad. And not just chassidus Chabad, but really the defining meaning of Yudas Kislev, or what Yudas Kislev is really about. That's what the Rebbe says. How? So the Rebbe says as follows. When the Baal Shem Tov arrived on the scene, we were in fact a prince in critical condition. We were on the heels of everything that happened in the 1600s, Tach v'Tat, and Shabbos Tzvi, and pogroms, etc., etc., etc. The Jewish people were in an extraordinarily low state. The survivors of Tach v'Tat, I don't know if you're familiar with this time period in European Jewish history. Tach v'Tat is a reference to 1648 and 49. In 1648 and 49, not dissimilar to what's going on right now, a band of Russian Cossacks rebelled. The Polish lords possessed the vast majority of the Ukraine. Ukraine has always been something they're fighting over. And the Russians rebelled against the Polish lords and rampaged not just across the Ukraine, but they wound up rampaging all the way into a good section of Poland. Of course, the greatest challenge that every military faces in a military campaign as they move through a campaign is maintaining supply lines. But for 2,000 years, the rampaging armies across Europe never had a problem with supply lines. Why? It was simple. Along the way, find a Jewish city, kill the men, do whatever you want with the women, and take their money and their food. And that's your supply, keep going. And every major war in the history of Europe, that's exactly how it went. If you went to high school world history class in America, they've sanitized it. It's as if there were no Jews for 2,000 years in Europe. There's a small reference to the Holocaust, but for the previous 2,000 years, the Crusades, Yimach Shemam V'Zichram, the Inquisition, Yimach Shemam V'Zichram, every single one of these moments, the goal when they set out was kill the Jews, not a problem. So that time period, they were led by a guy named Chmelnytsky. This one, the Chmelnytsky era, the Chmelnytsky pogroms, is viewed as, in its day, literally tantamount to the Holocaust. The numbers are out there, but rough estimates are that nearly 500,000 Jews were killed in the Chmelnytsky pogroms. 500,000 Jews, remember, there's no gas chambers, there's no machine guns. This is by sword, one at a time. 500,000 Jews were killed during Tach v'Tat. As a result, we wound up with all these refugee children, many of whom had no parents anymore. Everybody was dead. There was no organizations to pick them up. As a result, many of these kids had to go straight to work. Otherwise, they would have starved to death. And because of that, we wound up with a Judaism that had a caste system. There was a small pocket of Jews that were learned, scholarly, and gigantic minds. You have all the achronim of the time period. But the vast majority of the people either barely knew how to read from the Siddur, or didn't even know how to read from the Siddur. And as a result, the morale of the Jewish people was very, very low. You come to shul, you don't know how to open up a Siddur. It's a pity, right? And people came. And then there were Magidim. because then they came Shabbos Tzvi and his whole debacle. And after that, you now had preachers, Magidim, who stood up every single Shabbos, gathered together all of these pure and holy, simple folk, and told them that the reason you're suffering is because you're all ignoramuses. And because you're ignoramuses, you don't know how to pray. And because you don't know how to pray, Hashem hates your prayers. And because Hashem hates your prayers, that's why you suffer. And because none of you know how to do mitzvahs right, not only are you suffering in this world, but I have even better news. When you die, you're all going to hell. And this was every Shabbos, the same thing, over and over again. The prince was in critical condition. He was in a coma, in a state of utter rigor mortis. Along came the Baal Shem Tov and arrives on the scene. And the Baal Shem Tov, and subsequently the Maggid, had to be focused on literally the survival of the Jewish people. And that's not hyperbole. That's what it was. The survival of the Jewish people. Because if you could not revive, and if you could not reincorporate the masses into Jewish life, the small pocket of scholars were not going to be enough to be able to sustain Judaism. So the Baal Shem Tov and the Maggid engaged in a battle of survival, reinvigorating, literally resurrecting from the dead the Jewish people. Literally resurrecting from the dead. And so the Baal Shem Tov started with his avodah, bringing to the world the light of chassidus, and promulgating chassidus and the Chassidic teachings, even the most simplest aspect of the Chassidic teachings, finding simple folk and gathering them in the market squares and saying to them, no, Hashem loves you. Angels are tying crowns onto Hashem from every single word of davening you say every time you pray, irrespective of whether you understand the words, irrespective of whether or not you can read it in the Hebrew. The Baal Shem Tov started to revive the people. They came back to life. In order to do so, you have to promulgate some of the deepest mystical ideas of the Torah, chassidus. You have to now take the deep, deep mystical teachings and boil them down to a place where the masses could incorporate and inculcate them into their own lives so that they could start to live again. So that they could come out of that coma, so that they could come out of that terrible, terrible morass. And this was the Baal Shem Tov. The Maggid took it to another level. The Maggid exploded in an even bigger level. Because the Maggid saw that what the Baal Shem Tov started, he had to continue because Judaism needed to be saved. The Jewish people needed to be saved. And so when this conversation takes place, when a Pinchas Karetz picks up the piece of chassidus off the floor that has dirt on it, and the Alter Rebbe walks up to him and gives him the parable of the king and the prince, that's exactly what's going on here. We are taking the prince, we are grinding up the crown jewel in the king's crown, we're turning it to dust, we're mixing it with water, and we're pouring it everywhere. No matter where it spills, maybe one drop will enter into the prince's mouth and revive him from the dead. Literally. So the analogy worked perfectly. And therefore that was a perfect answer to the Pinchas Karetz. Says the Rebbe, that's not Chabad chassidus. That's chassidus haklalos. General chassidus. Or, to borrow from our previous conversation, Polish chassidus. And it's beautiful. Chas v'sholem, if anyone took from my previous words that chas v'sholem is something quote-unquote wrong with Polish chassidus, no, chas v'sholem. It's Kaddish v'Tahir on all levels. The Rebbe says, but the Alter Rebbe came into this world to do something completely different. The Baal Shem Tov and the Maggid, of course, building on what the Baal Shem Tov and the Maggid had already begun, obviously. And that's the explanation of the conversation. That when the Baal Shem Tov says that you're teaching too much chassidus, and the Alter Rebbe says, what are you talking about? I teach exactly what you taught me. And the Baal Shem Tov says, Zok chassidus, say chassidus. And the Baal Shem Tov afterwards says to the Maggid, battle, you taught him well. Because the Alter Rebbe's innovations and the Alter Rebbe's new level is the next level. Chassidus 3.0. But Chassidus 3.0 says that Rebbe is going to be something completely different. You know what it is? It's no longer a posturing to be able to find ourselves in a defensive survival position. We no longer have to survive. We're no longer cowering, hoping that we can survive. The Alter Rebbe comes to the world to create an environment of an absolute offensive against the walls of Golos. Chassidus Chabad came into the world not to defend anything anymore, not for survival. We're not in survival mode anymore. We are now on the offense. We are now conquering the world, the Rebbe says. So it's an entirely different mode. And Alter Rebbe knows that that's what he's introduced to the world. It's very clear to him. He knows what his goal is. He knows what he's trying to do. And he knows that his introduction of Chabad chassidus, specifically that aspect of chassidus, is no longer about the survival of the prince. The prince has been revived already. The Baal Shem Tov revived the prince. The Maggid revived the prince. The prince is alive. No. Now what are we doing? Now, look out, world, we're coming for you. Now we're coming hard. Look out. We are going to conquer the world. It's a whole different thing. If anybody needs to be on the defensive, it's the walls of Golos. Because we are here to bust those down and to actually bring the Geula. Certainly, of course, we know, and we sang the song earlier, that when the Baal Shem Tov entered into the chamber of Mashiach, and he asked Mashiach, when will our master finally reveal himself? And Mashiach answered, when your well springs will spread to the outside world. So, of course, everything about the Hasidic movement ultimately was about the bringing of Mashiach. But the first two generations of Chassidus was about, before we can engage in actually bringing Mashiach, the first thing we have to do is we need to revive the Jewish people from the dead. We have to take this prince who's in a coma, in rigor mortis. We have to pour some medicine down his throat, even if it spills all over the place, just to bring him back to life. But the Alter Rebbe himself says, not anymore. We're done with that. We're alive now. We're alive and kicking. Now, look out, man. We're coming for you. Look out. Now we're conquering the world. Chabad chassidus is not about the defensive, and it's not about survival. Chabad chassidus, from its founding in the times of the Alter Rebbe, has always been, we're conquering the world. So the parable of the king and the prince no longer applies here. Doesn't apply. Because the Alter Rebbe's chassidus and what the Alter Rebbe brought to the world was no longer about a prince being revived from the dead. What the Alter Rebbe brought to the world was, no, we're on the world, we're conquering, we're going out to get the world. And that's the definition of Yutas Kislev. That's the definition of what it means to be a Chabad chassid. And you see it. Nowhere more stark and nowhere more pronounced than when the previous Rebbe arrives in America, and ultimately over the years of the Rebbe's leadership. Nowhere is it more pronounced. When the Frierdiker Rebbe came to America in the 1940s, there were other holy people, Rabbanim, Rebbes, good people. Seriously. What was the mantra at the time? The mantra at the time, my father told me, that when he was a kid growing up, and even earlier, in Shtetl in Europe, they said, as in America's in the Steinetreif, the cobblestone streets of America, the cobblestones in the street, the cobblestones are treif. Even the stones are treif. That's how bad America is. Even the cobblestones aren't kosher. That's how bad America is. So when these people came to America, because they had no other choice, there was no place else to be, whether it was right before the war, during the war, or after the war, they had no other choice. There was no place else to go. They had to come to America. So they thought to themselves, how are we going to survive? How are we going to survive in a place where the steiners and treif, where even the stones on the street, the cobblestones on the street, are not kosher? How are we going to survive there? So they came with an idea. And not a bad idea. We're going to circle the wagons, like the first explorers who came out west. We're going to circle the wagons. We're going to create tiny enclaves, or maybe bigger enclaves, depending on how many people we start to grow to. We're going to create these enclaves, and we're going to take, proverbially, a blowtorch to the stones inside our enclaves. And that way we're going to kosherize even the stones in the streets, and we're going to create these little environments, and we're going to bring our kids up in there. We're going to do everything we can to emulate the shtetl that we had to leave here in America, and only that way will we survive. I grew up in that world. Borough Park, Brooklyn. Today, Borough Park, Brooklyn is like 10,000 times what it was when I was growing up there. But that was Borough Park, Brooklyn, even when I was a kid. And you could see, and as I began to learn to live like a Lubavitcher chassid, and I started to learn and start to understand what it was that actually made me different than all these other people, I realized one thing, that the previous Rebbe came to America, and when he saw all these circled wagons, these little circles, and most people thought that when he would come to America, he would create a small circle, his own small circle. He would create a circle, and keep his wagons inside, and kosherize the stones. And along came the previous Rebbe, he came to America, he said, that is not the way this is going to go. If we are to survive, we're going to open the wagons. We are going to engage in a full frontal assault on the apathy of American Judaism. We're going to war against the coldness, and the purpose of the war is to make sure that every single Jew, that no Jew will be left behind. Cliche for the song, but whatever. We're going to go out into the world. We're going to open up the wagons completely. And we're not only going to invite everyone in to our little circle inside our wagons. We're going to bring the wagons to them. And we're going to show every single one of them that they are an integral part to the mission of bringing Mashiach. It was a radical approach to the world. It was so radical in the 40s and 50s that when I was growing up in the 60s and 70s, when I was growing up in Borough Park, Lubavitcher was always preceded by an adjective. You know what the adjective was? Rabbi Levin, you know, right?
Yeah.
You know what the adjective was before Lubavitcher? Meshuggah. Meshuggah.
Nothing's changed.
Nothing's changed. They still call us Meshuggah Lubavitcher. But it's very different. In those days, it was a pejorative. Today, they wish they could be like us. In those days, it was a pejorative. And I grew up with that pejorative. Everybody around me called me Meshuggah Lubavitcher. You know what it feels like to be a 6 and 7 year old? And everybody around you calls you Meshuggah Lubavitcher. And at that time of my life, I didn't really even understand what that meant. And even then, was still a kid. You're affected by what people say to you. But even then, I knew it. I wore it as a badge of honor. I said, you people are confused. You don't know what you're talking about. And the fact that you call me Moshe Levin is because you're the one that's flawed, not me. And then, Rabbi Zalman Morozov said, Nishpoy l'shiyar. And I was vindicated. See? I told you. We're a different breed. We're opening the wagons. We're going out with a frontal assault on the world. I want to digress from a personal story. Because like I said, if I tell you a personal story, then I'm talking to me. If I'm talking to me, then maybe you'll hear something. We lived in a duplex. My mother had only one sister, I mentioned that before. They did everything together. We were like one big family. Before I was born, they lived in Williamsburg. They bought a house in Borough Park in 1959. I was born in 1961. My oldest sister still owns the house that my parents bought in 1959. And they bought the house, we all lived in the house together. It was sort of a 2.5 duplex. So my aunt and uncle, my mother's only sister, and their family lived downstairs. We lived upstairs. And my grandparents, the parents of these two sisters, lived in the back. They had a small apartment. That's where we grew up. It was a very beautiful home to grow up in. It really was. And it was like I had two mothers, my mother and my aunt. And we all felt that way. My cousins, those cousins, all their kids call me uncle. That's how close we were. Total. So you walked in the door, you walked in upstairs, downstairs, whatever door was open, two front doors, whatever door was open, you walked in because it was like one big happy family. We had a back staircase. One day, I was leaving the house. It was just shortly before Passover. My aunt, like my mother, wore a sheitel. In their younger years, like I said, they grew up in public schools, so they barely knew how to read. But as they got older, they started to daven. My kids, their memory of my mother, their only memory of my mother is my mother incessantly saying Tehillim. My mother looked like a Rebbitzin. They had no idea that my mother went to James Monroe High School and had parts in the Glee Club and did Gilbert and Sullivan operettas. Okay? To my kids, my mother was this big Rebbitzin. I remember when my mother started davening on a daily basis. So then, like most of the Jewish women that grew up in America, every morning she washed her hands. She said Reishis Chachma, which is not in our siddur. Maidani Reishis Chachma. Said the Tilas Yadayim, and she said the first paragraph of Shema. That's all my mother did. That's what my grandmother did, my mother's mother. And my mother's mother knew how to kasher a chicken. She knew how to roast a liver. Anyway, and my aunt the same. They both went through this metamorphosis almost together, and they both became these like Rebbitzin-like women who were constantly davening and saying Tehillim. That was their transformation. So it's a couple of weeks before Pesach, and I'm leaving the house. And instead of going down the front staircase, which would take me out to the street, I came down the back staircase, which would take me straight through my aunt's house. I must have been, at that point, 13, 14, not more. Probably less. And as I'm walking through, my aunt is sitting in the kitchen, saying Tehillim. So I stop, and my aunt's family was not Lubavitch at all. Not at all. To the extent that they had any Lubavitch connection, it was us. We were their Lubavitch cousins. I'm walking through the kitchen, and my aunt stops me. How you doing? I don't see you, because in those days already I was old enough that I was in yeshiva almost a whole day. So you can go a whole week to yeshiva, would never even see me anymore. So we stayed and talked for a few minutes. My aunt was a real estate broker at the time, and her brokerage office was an office where, I don't know if they do it like that today anymore, but working in real estate in those days in Brooklyn was like Shatchanim, it was Yentis. There was a bunch of women sitting around the office. This one had a buyer, this one had a seller, and you made a shidduch. That's the way they sold real estate. So they sat around and talked all day in the office, a bunch of Jewish women of various levels of Torah observance. So my aunt tells me, she says, you want to hear an interesting story? I said, sure. She says, last week we were having a discussion in the office about Pesach preparation and how many hours or days we're going to have to take off from work to be able to get our houses ready for Pesach. There's one woman in the office, who I guess was not really that from, and this woman says, what's the big to-do? Why is everybody making such a big deal out of Pesach preparation, getting ready for Pesach? She says, Erev Pesach, nobody ever comes into the office. I'm the only one who comes into the office Erev Pesach, she says. And I come in for a half a day, you gotta work. What do you mean, you got a job? She says, half a day, midday, I go home, she says, and I take my chametz dishes, and I put them in a cabinet. I take out my Passover dishes and my pots, and I cook for the Seder. Ma'alash, why is it such a big deal getting ready for Pesach? I don't understand. You put those away, take these out, you cook. What's the big deal? Now, obviously, my aunt is telling me this story, and her punchline is, can you imagine this woman thinks that's all it takes to get ready for Pesach? Sugar she is. Okay? I impulsively, literally, was like on impulse. When she finished the story, I responded, without even thinking, honestly. I said to my aunt, Oich madrega. This too is a level of observance. Thank God. Thank God this is a level of observance. Beautiful. At least she does that. And I turned to walk out the door, not really thinking about it. As I was walking out the door, I realized that my aunt is eerily silent. So I turned back around to look at her. And my aunt was literally staring at me like this. That was the look on her face. Literally. She's an educated, very intelligent woman. Literally like this. And it was then that it sort of hit me what just happened. She told me the story with the exact opposite punchline of what I had said to her. She was trying to tell me, what kind of craziness is this? Do you really think this is called Pesach observance? You just take out these dishes, put away those dishes, that's it? What is she, nuts? And my off-the-cuff response was, wow, how beautiful. And my aunt is sitting there, and I realized afterwards, with a look on her face like, did this kid grow up in my house? The heck? Why does he have such a completely different reaction? Is this my nephew who grew up almost like my son? What kind of crazy reaction? Just the exact opposite of what I was trying to bring out. He, off the cuff, instinctively said, oh, this too is a level. And my aunt, it took her a few seconds to recover, because first she was literally sitting like this. And then when she recovered, she said the following words: spoken like a true Lubavitcher. To my aunt, this was a moment. Wow. Wow. This kid grew up in this house with me, but for the first time I'm realizing that his world view is not just slightly different than mine. It's in a completely different plane. It's an entirely different world view. To my aunt, this was what they used to call it, a what? Aha moment. But it used to be a product when we were kids. Not a Kodak moment. Maybe it was a Kodak moment, whatever. When we were kids. This was an aha moment for her. She was like, what? And the truth is, I just walked out the door, wherever it was that I was going. The impact and the depth of the story didn't really hit me till later. And I started to realize what had just happened here. Says the Rebbe, the reason why the Alter Rebbe in prison cannot use the story of the king and the prince as an excuse for him spreading chassidus, because the chassidus that the Alter Rebbe was spreading is something completely different. It was now an assault on the walls of Gos. No longer survival. It was an all-out offensive, an all-out war that the Alter Rebbe had declared that the teachings of the Baal Shem Tov was now going to happen. We were going to make it happen. And that's what it meant to be a Chabad chassid. And so the Alter Rebbe turned and said, okay, you want me to go back to the survival mode? That's what he asks them. What do you want me to do after I get out of here? You want me to go back to the survival mode? I can go back to doing it your way. And the Baal Shem Tov now, and the man have to say to him, no, step it up. Turn it up. More and more and more. The Yiddish world out there, and it's a beautiful world out there. I want to make sure that you shouldn't think chas v'shalom that I'm mocking or belittling anybody. There's a world filled with torah and mitzvahs and yiras shamayim and goodness. It's all beautiful, and every single part of it. Yeah. Still, it's flying to New York for a family wedding, and it's like an oracle. This is the guy, because some of these people have either never met me or only meet me very rarely, the next generations. But know of this mythical shliach of the Rebbe that is their cousin, uncle, well, again, not uncle literally, because my own family all knows who I am, but uncle by extension. It's that mythical guy. And it's really hysterical. It's kind because I come to these simchas and they line up to introduce themselves to me. Everybody wants to say hello to me. Because they're aware of this mythical Chabad rabbi in Los Angeles. Of course they are. Oh, then I'm still Jewish. Oh yes, I'll tell you. I came to one chassidus with all of my kids. My oldest niece, my oldest actual niece, my oldest sister's oldest daughter, with whom I'm very close still. She comes over to me at the end of the wedding, and she says, it's such chaval, it's such a shame that you all live in Los Angeles. I'm coming with all my kids to the wedding. I said, really, why? Why? She said, because we don't get to be a family. My kids don't get to know your kids and be able to really be close to each other, because it's so amazing to meet your kids. And they're so normal. She couldn't think of another word to say. Because to her, how is it possible that we left Borough Park, wound up in Brentwood, and we brought up kids? Expect my kids are going to come up from Brentwood to come to visit. Okay, Bez Hashem, they'll still be keeping Torah mitzvahs, but their hair is going to be 18 different colors. They're going to have piercings in places that God never meant for there to be holes, etc., etc. They'll be wearing who knows what, Birkenstocks and multicolored robes, banging on tambourines, not the tambourines that my wife bangs on, but other kinds of tambourines, etc. That's what they expected. And these kids come, and they're like regular frum kids. Shocking. It's a shock to the system. They couldn't understand, they can't understand it. Till today. Now they know it exists. They still don't understand how. But they know enough of my kids to know that it's real. This is what the Alter Rebbe did. Because for us it's normal. For us it's kind of standard fare. There's no news here. Nothing to see. Move along. This is how we roll. So the Rebbe says that if you want to understand why the Alter Rebbe didn't introduce in that conversation the story of the king and the prince, because it doesn't apply. It applied to the Baal Shem Tov. It applied to the Maggid. It doesn't apply to the Alter Rebbe. It doesn't apply to you and me here today, 7 generations later. It doesn't apply. We are engaged in an all-out assault on the walls of Gullus. We're watching in front of us the Rebbe's prophecies being fulfilled and open in front of us. Somebody sent me today the newest video. I don't know if you saw it or not. The rebels in Syria, Yimach Shemam B'Zichram, why not? Okay? Are presenting themselves to the Israeli military and handing over bombs, guns, ammunition. They're handing it over. They're handing it over to the Israeli military. Is this not the fulfillment of the prophecies? Is this not, what else is it? How else can you define it? Is this not what the Rebbe said in Tav Shalom Daled? Exactly 30 years ago. No, 40 years ago. No, 50 years ago. I lost my math. I'm not doing the math so good. 50 years ago, right now. 50 years ago, the Rebbe said, conquering Har Hermon, destroying Syria, is integral to the actualization of the redemption through Mashiach. No brainer. We've been too dumb for the last 50 years to do what the Rebbe said. So the Rebbe is orchestrating in heaven together, of course, and treating the Eibishter. And now Hashem is looking at us and saying, okay, you're not smart enough, I'll just have him give it to you. You never have seichel to conquer it on your own, I'll just have him give it to you. Fulfillment of the Rebbe's prophecies. What's the takeaway? It's so obvious. Because when the Rebbe empowers every single one of us, the Rebbe is not just empowering those people who call themselves Chabad Chassidim. By extension, the Rebbe is empowering everybody. And I'll end this section, oh my God, the Farbrengen, I don't know how late you want to go, with a story of my cousin, who's like a brother to me, that aunt's son, that aunt's only son, who's a bab of chassid, who has a shtreimel and everything, the whole thing. He's in the jewelry business. He came to Los Angeles on business. How could he come to Los Angeles on business, not come to visit me? Right? So we're standing in the Chabad house, and a Yid walks in. I started a conversation with the guy, and I said, did you put on the phone today? He said, of course not. I said, come, we're going to put on the phone. He said, sure, of course, no problem, I'll put on the phone. I turned to my cousin, and I said, go put on the phone with him. My cousin's a Yid with a beard, shtreimel, payas, the whole thing, right? He freaked out. He literally freaked out, like, what? What? What'd you say? I said, yeah, go put on the phone with him. You know, what, me? What? No, you want me to put on the phone with him? I said, yeah, go put on the phone with him. What's the problem? Which phone should I use? I said, your own. It's not, it's a little bit different. It's a Polish chassidus not. So I don't want to get confused using my phone. You won't know what to do because the knot is different and the loop is different. Check, it's yours. Put them on like you put on your own phone. He was freaked out. Didn't know what to do. He was terrified. Terrified. I turned and deliberately, literally walked out of the room. I went someplace else to laugh at him. I walked out of the room, I left my cousin with this guy. I came back like 2 minutes later. The poor guy was hanging from the straps of the shayad. Choking. Help! Help! No. But seriously. My cousin was struggling to get the tefillin on the guy's arm. Not something he does regularly. He was utterly and completely freaked out. He was freaked out from it. So it's more than just the idea that he had never actually ever asked somebody else to put on tefillin. Baruch Hashem, he has kids, so at some point he put on tefillin on them at their bar mitzvahs, right? So it's not like, that whole dentist thing where you can't figure out how to put on tefillin on somebody else's arm. You get all confused because it's going backwards. He put on tefillin on his kids' arms. Taught them how to put on tefillin. No, it was the idea. The mind-altering, life-changing idea. OMG. I'm going to put on tefillin with somebody else. I live in that cocoon. Another cousin came on business once. Also a guy wears a shtreimel. He said, he calls me up in advance. He's going to be in town. He can't leave. He has a Friday morning appointment. Can he stay by me for Shabbos? I said, of course he can. Comes in there. He pulls in for Shabbos, and I see him getting dressed for Shabbos. I said, where did you just try him? He says, I didn't bring it. What are you talking about? What do you mean you didn't bring it? Why did you bring your straw? He said, well, I felt I was going to be by you. I don't know, walk out and just, what? What? What's the matter with you? We share a grandfather. Right? So my father's side, that particular cousin. My father's father was a chazan. I told you, my father was also a chazan. My grandfather was a chazan in the shul of Baruch called Bnei Yehuda. Recently, I bumped into somebody who said, which Hecht are you? And I said, not the ones you know, because people ask me all the time. They said, did you know a chazan Hecht, Bnei Yehuda? I said, what? That's my grandfather. See, you remember, this guy grew up there. Anyway, my grandfather was a chazan Bnei Yehuda. The rabbi was a Rabbi Kurzner, big Talmud Chacham. Big Talmud Chacham. It was an Ashkenaz shul. Big Talmud Chacham, a very good Jew, but very Litvish. And so they had a concern to have a chazan who wears a shtreim. It's a bit odd for them. So my grandfather, when he would go to work, he would daven every other Shabbos. So on the Shabbos that he had to go to shul, to daven there, he wouldn't wear a shtreim when he went there, because it would make trouble with his job. I davened in the Lubavitch shul, which was in the path of my grandfather coming home. So some Shabbos, as I was coming home from shul, I'd see my grandfather walking home from his shul in a hat, not in a shtreim. And he was always very cold. And I go over Zaidi, Shabbos, give him a kiss. He was like, didn't want to have any part of me, would keep going. So one day I finally asked my father, what's with your father? Because it was so cold to me when I bumped into him in the street on 16th Avenue. My father started laughing. He said, your grandfather is rushing home to put on his shtreim. He feels very uncomfortable walking in the streets without a shtreim. So he's rushing home to put on his shtreim. He's not angry at you. He loves you. He's rushing to go home. My cousin comes to breakfast. I didn't bring your shtreim. You didn't bring your shtreim home. It's like saying I came without underwear. I don't understand. You didn't bring clothes for Shabbos? You didn't bring your shtreim home? Well, I didn't think. What do you mean? What's not to know? I'll tell you what's not to know. You know what was not to know? I only wear a shtreimel when the wagons are circled and we blowtorched the stones in the street. That's when you can wear a shtreimel. But if for whatever reason God has forced you to leave the enclave of the circled wagons, you can't wear a shtreimel out there. But to me, it was a double person. I was so shocked. I said to him, what are you talking about? What are you talking about? How could you not wear your shtreimel? It's like me saying, on Shabbos, I'm going to walk around in Brentwood in a Yankees cap and a windbreaker because I don't want to look different.
Yankees cap?
Yeah. In LA, everybody's wearing Yankees caps. It's a great conversation starter. It's going to be years before the Red Sox come back. I promise you that. It's going to be years. Okay? Right? Did you say Mets? Are you a masochist? You need help, man. Okay? Well, I'm going to walk around in Brentwood because I want to look like everybody else and start wearing a baseball cap and ridiculous. I'm the rabbi. When I first came to Brentwood, I walked the streets of Brentwood and people went, what is that? Not who is that? What is that? Today I walk the streets of Brentwood and everybody knows there's the rabbi. You didn't go in, everybody knows. Everybody knows. Why? We opened up the wagons. That's what your Kislev is about. We're sitting here tonight. And so therefore the takeaway, every one of us needs to walk out of here tonight, opening up your wagons. Take one aspect of your Yiddishkeit, of your Torah and mitzvahs, take at least one thing, if not more. And instead of being in survival mode, take it and put it on the offense. Use it to conquer the world. Go out into the world and conquer. Because that's what's expected of us. Just like the entire world is waiting for the Jews to bring the Geula, the Jews are waiting for the global Jews. That's what the Alter Rebbe put in motion. That's what Yudis Kislev is. I went too long. I have a tendency. Chaim Brider. Chaim, my dear brothers and sisters, every single one of you. Again, I'm saying, I'm talking to myself, you're just listening. So I really appreciate you all being here, because as a result, I'm able to skip my next 4 therapy sessions. Because I've been able to talk it out to all of you. Chaim. Taka. Use and do what we're supposed to do what's expected of us, and actualize the revelation of Melech HaMashiach, that Rebbe taking us out of Golus once and for all. Chaim.
Yeah. Position goes on Yossi. Rabbi.
What?
I want to tell you a story that happened to me this past summer, because I think it's very indicative of what we're talking about here. And a slight introduction to the story. I first came to Los Angeles in 1981, Tashim Mem Aleph. I was part of Rabbi Kunin, my father-in-law, had founded with the Rebbe's bracha the first Chabad yeshiva on the West Coast, which today, Baruch Hashem, is a burgeoning and world-renowned institution of Torah, Yeshiva Oral Chaim Chabad. It had been founded in 1978, and the Rebbe immediately sent 10 senior Bacharim to be able to found and get the yeshiva off the ground. And then those 10 Bacharim, which was pretty normal in those days, they still do it today, those 10 Bacharim were replaced by another group of 10 who were here for 2 years, ultimately 2.5 years. And their goal was to create a makom Torah, make it into a place of Torah. Because obviously the average Angelino kid didn't even understand what it meant to be in a yeshiva. So these senior yeshiva students were there to mentor the younger students, A, to create a vibe and a fire of Torah, and B, to mentor the younger students that they should be able to develop into yeshiva students themselves. And yeshiva slowly started to grow. I was part of a group of 10. We were the third group to come here. So the first group was here for only 1 year. The second group was here from 1979 to the middle of 81. And then we came here in the middle of 81, Passover 81. Me and 9 of my friends. We're still very close till today. We still scream at each other. We have a WhatsApp group. We argue all the time. Yeah. Okay. Anyway, part of being a yeshiva bacher in Chabad, anyone that's ever been to a Chabad yeshiva, you know, that on Fridays, we have what's called Friday Mivtzayim. On Fridays, the boys go out in pairs, 2 at a time, to routes. Everybody has a route. And you go on this route, and you put on tefillin with people. You meet people, you give them a Torah thought for the week, and you talk to them, maybe you put up mezuzahs on their doors, etc., etc., but the main goal is tefillin and other stuff, just to be able to work with them. And everybody has a route. So when I first came here in 1981, when I first arrived here, so I had a route as well. My route was every Friday, La Cienega Boulevard, 1981, between Beverly Boulevard and Esmanica Boulevard, 8 blocks on 2 sides of the street.
Wow.
In those years, in 1981, those 8 blocks were literally wall-to-wall Persian rug stores. That's all there was there. For 8 blocks, there was only Persian rug stores. That's all it was. Okay? Many of them were like these small little stores with rugs piled high. I could tell you stories, not for now. But that was, turns out, my first introduction to Persian Jews, and it's been my goal ever since. Whatever. Anyway, so I went with the Lebanon Zayin Kazut, Rabbi Danny Yiftach Hashem, who today is Chabad of Marina Del Rey. He was, at that time, one of those younger kids that we were mentoring. He was a Persian young man who had escaped the revolution and had come to America and was placed by Chabad in our yeshiva. And I would go with Rabbi Danny, who was then just a kid, and we would walk together. And he spoke Farsi, obviously, I didn't. And we would go and do a sign on Fridays on La Cienega Boulevard. Okay. And Rabbi Danny and I are close ever since. So the average Mivtzayim route, you need to know this as a backdrop for the story, the average Mivtzayim route gets 3-5 tefillin. Anybody here goes Mivtzayim on Fridays? On a route? How many tefillin do you get on your route? 3.
How about Zalman? How many did you get?
Zalman, how many do you get?
1.
1.
No more.
Yeah?
How many did you get?
Like 4, 3 or 4, right?
5.
So a decent route is 3 to 5. A really, really, really good route, 8 or 9. 7, 8, 9. You have 7, 8, 9 tefillin on your route. You're off the charts. Okay? We, on La Cienega Boulevard in 1981, okay, you ready? 50 was a bad week. 50 tefillin was a bad week. That was a slow week for us. Most of the Bachurim came back from Mitzrayim. We used to have these forms that you filled out, which was a duch, basically, a report that would go to the Rebbe of what you did that day. And it had a line. How many tefillin did you do? How many mitzvot? Any notes, any special things you did? You had these duch forms. So most guys, when they got back to yeshiva, they would take their form and they would go, okay, I put on tefillin in that store, and I put on tefillin in that, I got 4 today, right? I said, write down. We couldn't do anything of the sort. It was impossible. We took our duch form and we turned it over on the back and we went 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. We kept marking. That's the only way we could keep count. A bad week was 50. Because there was no such thing as a Persian Jew in those days. There was no such thing as a Persian Jew. You asked them, Tefillin Bozar, they all put on tefillin. Nobody said no. Everybody put on. So you came into a typical rug store where there was absolutely no commerce going on, none. All it was 5 or 6 elderly or middle-aged Persians sitting around in a room that was so stuffy you couldn't breathe, piled high with rugs, and they were drinking tea.
Right.
In the middle of July, they were drinking tea. You couldn't breathe. I came in one day there, Rabbi, chai michai. No, I don't want any tea. No. It's 80 degrees outside. No. And I said to them once, what is the meaning of this? Why are you drinking tea in the middle of July? Oh, Rabbi, you do not understand. So hell's going to understand what I'm saying now. You do not understand. We drink the tea on very hot day. Because when you drink the tea on a hot day, make it you cooler. I said, that makes as much sense. That makes as much sense as saying that if you need root canal on your tooth, ask somebody to stomp on your ingrown toenail and you won't feel the pain in your tooth anymore. What, Rabbi? Yes, I didn't understand. Forget it, don't worry. But I constantly repeat this story about how many tefillin we used to get on La Cienega, because those of you that know or don't know, the majority of my congregation are Persian Jews in Brentwood. So I talk about it all the time to point out that there was a time when there was no such thing as a Persian Jew who chas v'shalom said no when you asked them about tefillin. Today, Rahman al-Islam, unfortunately, the Persians have polarized, in this city for sure, and now we've reached a point where they become so Americanized. When you say, come put on tefillin, I don't do that. What? You're Persian, stop it. Stop it. I do it. That's what I say to people. Don't tell me you don't do that. You're barely off your camel. Come over here. Stop it. What's stop it? Okay, that's the introduction. This past summer, my doorbell rings. I come to the door, open the door. There's a kid standing there. Obviously, an elderly Persian Jew. He's got it written all over his face. Might as well be holding a sign. I'm an elderly Persian Jew. I say, Shalom Aleichem, can I help you? Can I help you? He says, yes, can I come in? Sure, come on in. He comes in, and I say to him, what can I do for you? He says, I have a rug I want to donate. Okay. Most Chabad houses ultimately turn into a repository of people's third-hand junk that they can't get rid of. And rather than spend money to get somebody to take your junk out, you call the Chabad house and say, I'd like to donate this to you. Huh? And they want a receipt, of course. Okay. So I said to him, Rabbi Yid, I don't need any rugs. I don't need any rugs. We have a couple of rugs in the shul because you can't be a shul filled with Persians and not have Persian rugs in your shul. It's that in the question. So we have a couple of Persian rugs in our shul, but I don't need any more. No, thank you. No, thank you. It's like a white elephant. Too much responsibility. I don't want it. He said, no, I think you're going to want this. So I've been around with the Persians so long that I already know what to ask. So I said to him, okay, is it Chinese or Persian? What kind of rug is it? He says, no, this is a Persian. I said, okay. Machine or handmade? He says, no, this is a handmade Persian rug. It's not just a handmade Persian rug, it's a Tabriz. Really good rug. A Persian Tabriz, handmade. Okay. I said, wool or silk? He said, no, it's silk. I said, you have a silk Persian Tabriz handmade rug? He said, yeah. I said, okay, we can talk. Now we can talk. But I need you to understand, I said to him, because a lot of these people want to be able to have the mitzvah of putting it in the shul, and that it's in the shul all the time, right? I said, I'm not putting this on the floor of my shul. There's no way. I can't take responsibility for it. I don't want it to get ruined. I just want you to know right now, you can donate the rug. I'm going to turn around and sell it. I want to make sure you understand that. I want to be clear, transparent. I don't want anything to... He said, no, that's exactly what I want you to do. I want you to sell it. I'm taking you to sell it. I said, how big is this rug? He tells me it's 5 meters by 8 meters, 15 by 24. It's a big, big rug. I said, wow, this rug is humongous. He said, it is. You're not going to be able to take it. You're going to have to send like a mover to come pick it up from me. I said, okay. He said, you want to come see it? I said, I'm going to bet it's all rolled up and packaged right now. He said, yes, it is. I said, there's no point in me coming to see it because once you unroll a rug that big, there's no way to re-roll it up. So I'm not even going to waste my time. I'll just try to send somebody to come pick it up. Come sit down. Let's talk. So I said, okay, fine. We've done our business. Where do you live? Where do you live? He says, around the corner. You live around the corner? How long have you lived there? 24 years. You're a Persian Jew who's lived 24 years around the corner from Chabad Pico-Bais Bezalel. Have you ever come in? I've never met you in my life. You've never come in. He said, I'm not that kind of Jew. I said, what is that supposed to mean? What do you mean? He said, to be honest with you, we used to have an overflow minion. Because I think he went there, I don't know where he went. He said, I only come to Yom Kippur services, and I really only come to Yom Kippur services to be able to stare at the pretty girls. It's a guy in his 70s. I said, let me think you're about past your time on that kind of stuff. He said, no, I come to look at the pretty girls, that's all. Other than that, I have not crossed the threshold of a shul in more than 30 years, he tells me. So I say to him, Mishpacha, do you have a family? Nope. You don't have a family? No. Wife? You're married? No, I was never married. I said, you were never married? He says, yes, I have a child, but I was never married. At the moment she got pregnant, I said, I'm not a husband, I'm not a father, goodbye, goodbye. I said, whatever happened to that woman? She went to Israel, she met a nice guy, she's married to him, my son regards him as his father. I said, do you even know where this kid is? Yeah, but I have nothing to do with him. I said, does he have kids? Yeah, he has 2 kids. And? No, I have nothing to do. I said, you're a grandfather of 2 children and you have nothing to do with them? No. Do they even know you exist? He said, I don't know if the grandchildren know I exist. My son does, but I don't even know if my grandchildren know that I exist. For those of you that don't know Persian Jews, this is so completely out of character and so, people pronounce this word in different ways, anathema to everything that is a Persian Jew. Not to have a family and to distance himself from his family and to have kids that he has nothing to do with and grandchildren that he has no connection with. This is utterly and completely not Persian Jews. A total anomaly. A total anomaly. And I, because I know and I've had all these years of experience, I'm looking at him with a look on my face like, I said, by the way, where did you find, how come you're here today? He said, there's another Yid, a Persian Jew, who lives also around the corner, who's my neighbor. We bump into each other in the street all the time. And so I mentioned to him that I want to donate a rug. He said, go to the rabbi, help him. That's the guy who comes regularly to shul. That's why he came in. But I'm telling you, if you don't know Persians, if you do know Persians, you know this, that I'm right. I'm telling you the truth. If you don't know Persians, I'm telling you, there is nothing more out of character for a Persian Jew to not have crossed the threshold of a shul in decades. Says that when he does show up, he only comes on Yom Kippur to whatever. Has a son and grandchildren that he has nothing to do with. It's totally not normal. Very not normal. So I'm looking at him like, wow, this guy's a unicorn. So we're talking. I said to him, okay, you're obviously retired. He said, yes, I am. I said, tell me what you did when you were in business. What did you do for a living? He said, I sold drugs. I said, really? He said, yeah. You might be aware, he says to me, I don't know if you know this or not. He tells me that in the early 1980s, the 8 blocks of Mount Cienega from Beverly Boulevard to Esmonica Boulevard were all Persian drugstores. I said, actually, yes, I do know that. I actually do know that. See, he tells me I was the wholesaler that supplied all those stores with drugs. I never stole myself. I was the wholesaler that sold, that gave them all those rugs. All those rugs, I was a big wholesaler, and I was the one who supplied them with all the rugs that were in their stores. That was what I did for business all my life. I said, wow, it's very interesting. Then he goes, wait a second, you don't have Persian. I said, no, I'm not. He said, really? I said, yeah. This is one of my favorite lines. I always tell people that I went to a psychic and I found out that in a previous life, I was a rabbi in Isfahan. And when I was a rabbi in Isfahan, I made my congregants' lives miserable the whole time. So they sent me back again into this life, and they gave me Isfahanis, and now they make my life miserable. Now, interestingly, whenever I tell that joke in front of Persians, you know what the reaction is? So what's the reaction? It's okay to go to psychic? I did not know, Rabbi, I can go to psychic. That's always the reaction I get. I did not know, Rabbi, I can go to psychic. Did not know. Okay. So he says, you're not Persian. I said, no, I'm not. He says, so how do you know that there were rug stores on La Cienega Boulevard in those years? How do you know that? I said, well, I'll tell you. The Rebbe sent me here in 1981. I was in the yeshiva on La Brea and Melrose. And every Friday, I would go with a partner of mine, and we would walk up and down La Cienega Boulevard to all those rug stores that you're talking to for almost 2 years, putting on tefillin with the people in the stores. So that's how I know. This cold, freezing cold Jew goes, and I said, what's the matter? He couldn't speak. It took him a few seconds to compose himself. And he said, I put on tefillin with you. And I have not put on tefillin since. So imagine for a moment. Here's a Yid, so detached from Yiddishkeit, so utterly detached from Yiddishkeit. Doesn't come to shul on Yom Kippur, doesn't have anything to do with his family, doesn't have a connection to his children or his grandchildren, etc., right? So completely detached from Yiddishkeit. No kesher whatsoever. But he remembers that 44 years ago, do you understand? 44 years ago, that's a long time. He remembers that he put on tefillin with a yeshiva bacha in one of the stores on La Cienega. And he's remembered that ever since. And the next time he put on tefillin was 44 years later with the same guy. I mean, he didn't remember me personally, obviously. But he remembers putting on tefillin with a bacha in one of the stores on La Cienega 44 years ago. This guy doesn't remember what he did Yom Kippur. Who knows what he does? Right? But he remembers it 44 years ago. He put on tefillin with a bacher in a store on Asiyaga, in a bookstore. That's what the Rebbe did. And that's what the Rebbe does every day. So if you ever wonder to yourself, one tefillin or two tefillin on a Friday, Zami? You get only one tefillin or two tefillin on a Friday? 4 or 5, whatever. And you wonder to yourself, you walk for hours on end. For what? To find 2 tefillin, 3 tefillin. In Morristown, we used to walk in the freezing cold, 9 inches of snow, etc. Boiling New Jersey heat and humidity, pouring sweat down. We went there every Friday. In LA, okay, it's still LA. Right? But you say to yourself, you wake up one Friday morning and you think to yourself, I'm kind of tired today. Maybe I'm not going to go with you. Tired. Reasonable? I'll give you a better one. Yeah? May I ask what you do for a business? Oh, good. But you still interact with people. And you're a person who puts on film every day. So now imagine you took it upon yourself, based on everything we're talking here tonight, that now it's your turn to open up the wagons and go find another yid. Put on film. You have your lunch with somebody? I have a very dear friend who's a producer in Hollywood. But like for real, he doesn't produce business cards. He's a real producer. And when I'm coming to see him, he deliberately sets up meetings for me to come, either right after somebody that he wants me to attack, or right before somebody wants me to attack. And he sets these people up. And he's always late with his meetings. And so very often I'm sitting in his living room, just sitting around waiting for him. Who knows what he's doing. He's always late, notorious. And some other guy comes in and sits down and says hello. And immediately when this other guy comes in and sits down, I know, okay, he wants me to get this guy. That's why the guy is here. So I'll strike up a conversation and tell him, come, I'm going to put on tefillin. No, I don't do that. I'll put on tefillin. I said, let me explain something to you. So-and-so, who set up this meeting with you, set it up that I would be here the same time as you for you to put on tefillin. So tell you right now, you're not going to have a meeting with him until you put on tefillin. You might as well do it. We have a friend, a guy I became friends with, who was first very resistant. Was one of his friends, also a producer, who goes by the last name Lee. And he told me before the guy came, he said that my friend Mr. Lee is coming. You have to, when he comes, okay, you're going to put on the phone with me. You're going to put on the phone. I said, Lee, why do you want to put on the phone with a Chinaman? He said, no. His name is Leibowitz. He changed his name to Lee in Hollywood. Could you imagine a guy named Leibowitz in Hollywood needs to change his name to Lee? What are you, crazy? Why did you do that? I'll bet Mr. Lee Spike Lee changed his name to Leibowitz. What kind of crazy idea is that? So we have a common friend. He calls. I made a big joke out of it when I finally met this guy, and I said, "Oh, my Chinese friend." And till today, that's an ongoing joke between us. Mr. Lee, my Chinese friend. Okay. So from now on, you have to always have your tefillin at the ready. And when you meet somebody, it's something you're going to say, maybe, you'll remember that I told you a story, that if you put on tefillin with that guy that you were afraid to start a conversation with, he will remember having put on tefillin for 44 years. So that Friday morning when you wake up and you say, I'm too tired, I was by a Farbrengen until too late. After the Farbrengen was over, until I finished the Rambam, maybe Thursday night, you do like the Menhagim, you have to do Shnai Mikra tonight, and then you have to do Shnai Mikra again tomorrow, the Rabbeim did it, right? Okay, you have all these different Menhagim you have to do, you're going to be up all night long. In the morning, you're going to go, I'm too tired to go outside today. There's a Yid waiting, and we've upped the ante. The stakes are much higher today. It's no longer just 44 years from now he's going to remember. This is the guy that all of creation for the last 5,785 years has been waiting for. Because the second he puts on tefillin and says, Shema, Baruch Shem, Ach Tzadikim, we want Mashiach now, kaboom. Kaboom, he's the guy. He is the guy. If you let him slip past you, you've just made Gullus last longer. Ouch. No pressure. No pressure, Soya. It's this Kislev. L'chaim, everybody. I'm talking to me, I'm telling you. Tomorrow has to be a productive day. Tonight has to be a productive night. See this Kislev Affenfeld. Let's finally, once and for all, bring the Geula. Because nothing else will do. Chaim, l'chaim, l'chaim.
We're going to sing now the Alter Rebbe's Niggin. When you sing this Niggin, it's known. You can ask Hashem for anything when you sing this Niggin. The special song when we sing sometimes, 2 or 3 times a year, we sing this Niggin. So that's going to involve.
Yo, 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 it's an honor. Yeah. Yeah.
It's customary on Kislev, everyone take upon themselves in the sector. They're coming here.
And also at the bench.
And also the bench, the bench. Kislev on the bench. Being shamed with
At the bench, everybody.
the bench everywhere. Using an honor with the Rabbi side. Everyone out of mind and mind to those from shabbos.
Don't forget the bench, we're in the bench.
Oh, yeah. Lady number 7. Shabbos is 7.
My son told me this. I think maybe. So I don't know how they knew this story. I told him when I get home, he makes how we do. Let me tell you yeah, he's the father of the one who runs the